Hey, everybody, and welcome to a presentation on how to find a publisher for your video game. And so, one, congratulations on doing a project and working with a group like Game Jam Plus, because getting it out there, getting a game finished, no matter how short it is always the hardest part. There's a lot of companies out there and a lot of people out there who can put together about 90% of the game, but getting it shipped out the door is always that last 10% that's the hardest. So congratulations. We're going to be going through, how to use our publisher list to find the best partner for your game. The publisher list that I'm referencing is something that's available for free on our website, and there's a link at the end to get it. So don't worry about doing it right now. It's all fine. All the links that you need will be given to you and available, and I'll even give them to the folks that are running this fine little game jam so they can email them out to you as well if need to. But that's what we're going to do. We've got a list on the site that's got about 700 some publishers of games, and what we're going to do in the next hour, and it's going to be a lot crammed into a little bit, is walk you through exactly how you narrow a list of 700 and some publishers down to the ones that are right for you, how you find the right person to go to. This is what we're going to cover. Building that CRM list. We'll go over what a CRM is, how to find the publisher based on the kinds of games that you make, the platforms, the genres, all that kind of good stuff, who to talk to at the publisher, how to find them, how to get their contact information, what to send them, all of that good stuff. We're going to go through it in an hour. So yeah, be ready here. All right. So the first thing that you're going to need to do is you're going to need to get some sort of CRM. And a CRM is a customer resource management tool. The one that you have probably heard of is called Salesforce. It is the one that I recommend you do not get, simply because it is absolutely colossal. It is expensive, and it's built for companies who have hundreds, if not thousands, of salespeople going out and doing things. And as an indie dev, that's not you. You don't need to pay for that. You don't need all of that stuff. There's a lot of solutions that you can use. Just Google free CRM or small business CRM on the web, and it'll pop up a bunch of them. I've got clients who use spreadsheets to do it. I don't recommend it, and I'll tell you why, but it can be done. And I've even, got a friend who uses Trello to chart it. And again, I don't recommend it, but you can do it. So what you really want is something that is going to organize all these people that you need to know and make them searchable and remind you to follow up with them and all of that kind of good stuff. So when you're looking for this stuff, like I said, just do a search for small company, small business CRM. Start there. There's Sugar. HubSpot has one that integrates with their marketing materials. Let's see who has. Soho has one that actually looks a whole lot like Salesforce, but it's not, and it's way cheaper. The one we use here at the Powell Group is called Nutshell. It does everything we need it to do, and we've used it for 10 years. There's not some gigantic feature that I could tell you it's better or worse than anything else, because it just does what we need to do, and it's cheap. So that's what we've used for the last 10 years, and that'll work perfectly fine for you. So when you're looking at what you need to find in terms of features and all of that sort of stuff in your CRM, you want it to be able to hold at least 1,000 contacts. And I know that sounds like a ton, but it's really not once you start dealing with a bunch of publishers, because you can also use this to track your influencers, your marketing stuff. There's a lot of different things, but you want it to hold at least 1,000 contacts. It needs to have the ability to remind you to follow up with people. A good tag system or something, some of them call them buckets, some call them tags, whatever, but you need to have something that allows you to sort contacts. And then email open tracking. Most of them now have that. It's not a killer if it doesn't have it, but it's something that's very, very helpful, and we'll explain why in just a little bit. So the first thing you want to do is you're going to get this big old list. It'll be emailed to you, and you want to drop that into a spreadsheet. Any CRM you use is going to have an option to import contacts and publishers, and your CRM is going to have a specific template, whichever one you use. And they're all different, which is why I don't go through it, on this presentation. But you want to download that. That's going to be your template to import back into, and you want to drop that gigantic list of publishers into that form. So that list is going to initially just have the companies, the platforms that they publish on, and their website, because that's what you mainly need to know. But you want to populate it with that stuff first, and then there's going to be more stuff as well. So you need to have that option to put the genres in there, social media, contacts, people, their email address. 99% of that is going to be in whichever template that you're using, for whichever CRM it is. But in the event that it's not, those are the things that's going to make it, very helpful for you. So how are you going to fill this out? Because you got to fill it out and you got to get a whole lot of information in there before you can start sorting. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is go through and dig a little deeper on each one of these publishers. And there's a few things that we use online, that are perfectly free to use, that are going to help you do that. And so the first one is Steam Spy. And there's a couple of sites like this now that let you do this. So I'm just going to move this screen over here. Now, I do pay for one level of Patreon. I don't even know which one it is, to be honest with you, for Steam Spy. So the data that you see when we're doing this may be a little different than if you sign up for free. But at the end of the day, it's still going to be, I think it maybe costs $10 to get what I get. All the stuff that you basically need is in there. So let's pick one of these that just recently came out. So Medieval Dynasty. So we're going to say that we are, the game that we're going to be creating is a simulation RPG based in the medieval dynasty. Now, the beauty of Steam Spy, once you are paying for a certain amount of downloads or whatever, paying for their Patreon, is you can actually download a lot of this data. But there's a few things in here before we get there that I want to show you, because it's really, really, really good to have when you start looking at publishers. So obviously, this is key right here, the developer and publisher section. Whenever you're looking for publishers, especially when you're doing it on Steam Spy, if it has the same developer and the same publisher, and the company is the same between those two, that's not really a publisher. That's a developer who's self-publishing something. So those are the ones you want to, knock out anyway. But when they have two different ones, so here we know RenderCube is the actual developer and the publisher is Toplets. That's key. That lets you know this is somebody who takes on third-party titles like you have. And there it has each one of the genres that this game, covers. Now, if you click on the publisher themselves, so this is going to pull up all the info on all the games that Toplets has actually published on Steam. It's very good info to have for a couple of reasons. So it's already sorted by release date. Well, no, it's not. We're sorted by release date. There we go. So what you want to look at is, how many players, obviously owners, are in here, how much people are playing the game. And none of this is like 100% accurate, because they have different ways of, pulling these owners on something like Steam Spy. If a game has had a free Steam weekend, it's going to completely throw everything off, because there's going to be hundreds of thousands of users in here who aren't really users. But this will give you a good idea of, how many people are playing the game. So that's one thing that's going to be in there. So if we go back here, let's see. There's the tags and the genres. Now, for the tag system in our own CRM, we basically use the ones from Steam because it's the easiest ones to integrate. But we know we've got an RPG simulation. So let's take the next step and say, okay, let's go find the things that are simulation games. This is going to take a second because there's a ton of them in there, but here we go. So this page, once I click simulation in Steam Spy, it shows us all the games, and you don't need to go back 20 years on this either. So let's go, it's going to take it a second. we want to sort it by release date. The general rule in this type of data is if it's more than 2 years old, it's ancient. Don't even use it. Don't try to use it. It's not accurate anymore. That's how fast things change in the industry. So if there's a publisher that you're looking at who hasn't produced anything in 2 years, they're most likely dead. They're not in business anymore. So we're starting to get a little more data in here. Like I said, the beauty of paying the $10 or whatever I pay for Steam Spy is that down here at the bottom, you can actually download all of this as a CSV file, and it makes life a whole lot easier. But so first off, let's go ahead and switch this to release date. Unlikely to ever release. That's not what we want. Let's go back the other way. Here we go. All right. So here's things that are coming out in the future. Now we're getting into some of the stuff that just came out. So when you download this, it's going to give you the developers and publishers. You can triage that and say, I want to find the games that are published by different companies. And the developer, that's going to help you build that list. But then what you're mainly looking for are the different publishers who publish simulation games. And the same for RPGs and the same for any other genre that you're looking at. Now, why is that important? Because that helps you find the right ones. You always want to work for a publisher who has experience in the genre of the game that you're working with, basically. And so what we will do is when we aim these things, say it's an RPG like this, we always target the publishers who work in that genre and who also work in what we call genre adjacent areas. So, for example, for an RPG, you can safely assume that simulation games or adventure games are going to also appeal to that same demographic because they just simply do, generally. Strategy games are another genre adjacent to RPGs. Think through it as a gamer. If you like playing this game, go through your own Steam library or GOG or whoever you use and look at the other types of games that you play. Those are very good assumptions to make. So, when we're going out, we don't only want to send our game to all the RPG publishers, we also want to send it to strategy publishers, adventure publishers, and simulation publishers, because there's enough overlap there that it makes things very, very easy to do. So I'm going to show you one more quick thing on Steam Spy, which is really, really cool. So if you go to the related tab of a game, and so we know we've got basically a city builder survival game based, in medieval times. If you click related, it's going to pull up a lot of other games that are typically going to be found in the people that own one are going to own the other, basically. Now, you've got to jump a few pages because a lot of these things are, once they're free, it's going to completely screw up all your analysis because it's going to show you things that aren't necessarily there. But all right, so we got one here. Let's look at Banished. So when you're pitching to a publisher and you say, look, our game is going to appeal to RPG players and city builder players, you want to show that correlation. Or if you're saying that our game is Banished meets Skyrim, you want to be able to show that. On Steam Spy, the X analysis tab is perfect for this. It's awesome. So, okay, maybe not for this one. It's too new, but it shows you how many people own one game, Banished, almost 2 million owners, and how many people own Medieval Dynasty, a couple 100,000. But so let's just bounce back real quick and let's pick something else. Let's go say we're doing Banished, and now I lost my related tab. Here we go, related. Let's jump over here. Let's see. What's a good one? All right, Crusader Kings. Okay, so let's say we're building a grand strategy game / survival title, and it's going to appeal to people of Crusader Kings and Banished. And it's running, and it's running. How much are we going to have here? It's still doing. All right, I'm going to try it again. Anyway, 9 times out of 10, this is going to show you the number of players that own both of these games. And that's what you want to see. That's good data to have for all your different materials and when you're going to publishers and all that kind of good stuff. So anyway, use things on PC and console games. Use things like Steam Spy to figure it out. And the reason we put it on console as well is because, quite frankly, there's not a lot of games that are just published on PC or on console anymore. They're usually done together. And there's not a good site to go and research console games. I mean, yes, you could use something like Metacritic, but Metacritic isn't nearly as accurate as it used to be, simply because there are so many games that are coming out now. So we always use, when we're looking for PC and console publishers, we use Steam Spy. When we are looking for mobile games, we drag this one over here, we use App Annie, and this one is free as well. Just log in, doesn't cost anything. It's not going to give you all the insights, but it's going to give you plenty. So what you want to do is you want to go down to top charts. And then in your category, go to games, and, assuming again that we're doing a simulation game, we want to go to simulation. And so depending on whether or not you're free or paid or whatever, this will show you all the different games that are in the top up to 500 on the App Store. And you have to do, it's work. I mean, that's the bottom line. There's a lot of little, we call it grunt work, where you have to go in and do some research and do a bunch of data analysis. Do a bunch of data entry and that sort of stuff. But this is how you go and find that first cut, that these are the high level publishers who are going to be a good fit for us because they work in our genre. So that's, use App Annie for mobile games, and you can use Sensor Tower as another one, and then use Steam Spy to find your PC and console stuff. So, and one thing I want to note, if anybody's got questions along the way, toss it in the YouTube chat, and we'll go through them. I'm happy to answer your questions either along the way or, at the end, one way or another, we'll get you set up. So you want to go and, wrong one, get too far. You want to find publishers who have experience in the same genre that you do. The next is budget. It's not as easy when you're dealing with budget. So there are publishers that all have their own comfort range. There are publishers who don't want to put any money into development funding at all. They only want to work with games that are already finished but need marketing support. And then there are the publishers who, will invest in these games, and they're, some of them can't do more than $50,000. Some of them will do $5 million. Understanding what the comfort range for each one of those publishers is going to be key, because if you need $5 million to finish the game, it's not going to do you any good to send it to a publisher who only funds up to 50 grand or up to 500 grand. You've got to find that right comfort zone. There's not a easy place to go and find this. Now, if you go to some of the digital events like the ones that we do for Indie Game Business, when you're researching the publishers for your meetings, there's a tick box that says, I fund up to 200,000 or I fund up to 500,000, and you can sort them that way. That is awesome information that you need to capture and use in your own CRM as well, because that's the sort of stuff that's going to help you down the road. Otherwise, it comes with experience, and it comes with, conversation. A publisher who does primarily indie games is most likely not going to be developing or interested in publishing $1 million, $2 million, $3 million projects. Their comfort range is going to be under $1 million, usually under about 500,000, but it always depends. And don't be afraid to simply ask a publisher. It's like, tell them, it's like, hey, look, I've got this game, but we need X amount of money to, get it funded. Is that something that you're interested in? All of this is information that you need to be gathering and then keeping, in that CRM. So, down the road, because hopefully this isn't going to be the only game you look for publishing on. You're going to have more, and, you only really want to do this research once, and then you can go and update it from time to time. But you don't want to have to do this every single time you go out and do a publisher, look for a publisher. So, don't be afraid to, just frankly ask them, what their comfort range is on development funding. And when you do that, one of the answers you're going to get quite frequently is, oh, we'll look at anything. And so you want to kind of push back on that and be like, okay, so if I send you a project that's $2 million, you're okay with that? And that's when they'll go, oh, no, we don't really want to look at anything over X amount, whatever their number is. And then they typically follow that up with, but under the right circumstances, we'll look at something more expensive. The reality is they won't. They give you that range because that's what they want. If their range is up to $500,000 and they say, but we'll look at stuff higher, and you send them a $2 million project, they're not going to publish it. I will save you the trouble of figuring that out. They're not going to do it. So that's an area that you want to put in that CRM as well, to let you kind of narrow things down. And the other one is reputation. We'll get to that in a minute, as we start talking more about the publishers. But that's another one that is not really easy to go in and figure out here. So as you're doing your research, what you want to be looking for on top of the data are red flags. Red flags are basically warning signs, and every publisher is going to have one. You're not ever going to find a publisher who doesn't have some sort of red flag that goes along with them. But it's when, one or two flags start looking like a golf course and they're popping up everywhere. That's when you have to be worried. So, understand first and foremost, once they got the genre, are they publishing games similar to yours on platforms similar to yours? That's step number one. Step number two is what model do they focus on? Are they doing free-to-play games? Are they doing premium games? Do they only do subscription games? Or do they do some, combinations of each? Because it's really not going to do you any good to send a premium title to a publisher who only does free-to-play, or, vice versa, because they're not going to, 99 times out of 100, they're not going to change their whole business model for one game. You will get situations where you catch somebody early, but for the most part, it's not going to do you any good. Stick with the companies that are focusing on the business model that you have, on the genre, on the platform. Another one is, are their games being reviewed by media and fans? And so that's an area where, Steam Spy comes in handy as well. But you can look and Google up different games on YouTube or Twitch or whatever the streaming platform your choice is, and you'll be able to see. You want to make sure that this publisher's games are getting played on streaming media, because that's a good indication of whether or not they understand the influencer marketing. And influencer marketing is so important now. It's like the main way that games are marketed. Just a publisher sending out a press release about your game isn't really going to get any traction. You need to understand that this partner that you're choosing understands how to get influencers and streamers to play your game, and getting some sort of, barometer or number figure on how many of their games are played by streamers and what kind of time rates they get is a good way of doing that. Then you want to look at, what the price point is. So a lot of publishers are going to publish in that $10 to $30 range, or maybe $20 to $40, or $40 to $50. There's different ranges everybody's comfortable with, but that's going to be another key step in narrowing that list down. If you've got an indie game that's going to come out at $20 or $30, there's not going to be any sense in you sending it to a publisher who only produces AAA games at $60, because that's just not their area of expertise. But at the same time, if you do have a AAA game that you want to sell at $50 or $60, it's not going to do you any good to send it to an indie publisher who only does things in the $10 to $20, maybe $25 range. So get your genre, your platform, make sure your business model syncs up to what they're doing, and then make sure that they're getting good reviews. And well, I don't want to say good reviews. Good reviews help, but they're getting reviewed at all, and that their price point matches up. For the research and we talked about the reputation side. So that's typically an area you don't need to concern yourself with too much until you have 2 or 3 publishers who are interested. But then you really need to go in before you sign a contract and make sure that you've done your homework and done your research on the publisher, because I guarantee you they're doing it on you. So talk to other developers that they've worked with, and do simple searches on Google and Reddit, and try to get an understanding of the reputation that this publisher has, not only with consumers but with other developers as well. Because if you start seeing a lot of warning signs on social media and Reddit, for example, about this publisher hasn't been paying their bills, or they completely botched the launch, those are things that you need to be aware of. Now, keep in mind, the internet is the internet, and there are people out there who just have nothing better to do than go out and say bad things about people, or they blow something completely out of proportion, and it's not necessarily a valid concern, or it's something that was a one-time issue. So use some judgment on it. But the typical way that we do it is you can go and you can ask that publisher for references, but think about what you do anytime a potential employer asks you for references. So you don't give them that boss that you just had that you got in fights with all the time and you never got along with. You basically send them to your friends. And that's what a publisher is going to do if you ask them for references of developers that they're going to work with. They're not going to send you to that developer that they didn't have a good working relationship with. They're going to send you to the people that did, they were happy with, and that everyone's going to give them a good review. You have to take it upon yourself by looking into, the background of the publisher and the games that they published, and contact these developers on your own and say, hey, look, we're looking at doing a publishing deal with XYZ publisher. I know they published your game. How did it go? And get their feedback. Find out, were they receptive? Did they get back to you and respond to things in a timely manner? Did they find out who their producer was? Because even within a publisher, one producer's experience with their developers versus another one can be completely different. It can be completely different for the good and completely different for the bad. But you want to find out, how the relationship went. What was their response time on requests or emails that were going out and things that needed to be done? How did they handle the launch? Was they happy with the marketing? And who the producer was and how that relationship went as well. So all of this boils down into things that you need to know before you start signing a deal. Okay, so we've got our publishers picked up. We know who the best people are. So now we've got to figure out, how do we find the right person to send it to at that publisher? So this is where we're going to use a variety of different tools. Most of these are free. Mailtester just recently switched over to a paid model, but you can still search for like 100 emails, in there, which is going to be a lot for you. But let's go through this like one at a time. So the first place that you're going to want to go is on LinkedIn. And if you are doing this professionally, then might help if I actually had that pulled over here. There we go. So if you are, working in the industry professionally, you need to have your own LinkedIn page, and you need to have one for your company. It just makes you look professional. And, when we're going through and we're researching developers or publishers or whoever in the industry, it's not necessarily a death blow if they don't have a LinkedIn page, but it's a red flag, because it doesn't take long to do. And it's really helps your image when people are looking you up. Along the same lines, if you have a website, then you should have an email URL. Don't send professional emails to folks in the industry from your Gmail account or from your Hotmail account, because it just, again, doesn't look professional. And that's what you want to do. This is the business side of games. This is the part that lets us keep doing what we do, because, if you're in it just for the art or just for a hobby, then you don't need to worry about making money from it. But if you want to make games for a living, for your real job, you're going to have to make money from them, or you're going to end up working, the other job that you don't like and still making games, in the evening and on the weekends when you have time. So the first thing we want to do is, start looking up these publishers. I always like picking on my friends over at Akupara. So we're going to pretend that Akupara was one of the publishers that came up for our list. So Go here, their LinkedIn page, it's got a link to their website. All that stuff is easy to come up with. You want to go down to people. And so under the people, you want to be looking for CEOs, business development folks. Let's see. Yep. Matthew is their senior BD guy. Executive producers are a good option once you get past the C-level folks and the BD folks. That's when you go to the producers, senior producers, that sort of stuff. But that's how you find out who you need to be going to. And so that's going to fill in a couple of more slots on your spreadsheet that you're going to upload into your CRM. This is the person, this is their title. So how do we find, we know we need to send it to David. How do we find David's email address? So there are a couple of tools. Like I said, they're mostly free. So one is hunter.io. And this one, you have to set up a account, but it's free. And so as long as you're not using it like 100 times a day or whatever their limit is, you don't ever have to pay for it. So what we do is we go and put in Esquenta Games. And so you see, even just starting the search, it pops up because Hunter's website has little spiders that go out and they gather all this information. So when you do this, it's going to pull up all of the websites that are publicly available. So none of this stuff is violating GDPR. You're not hacking into anything. The only searches that show up on here are the ones that are publicly available. So here we go. Here we have David's email address. We even have his Twitter page. So easy enough. All right, but let's assume nothing came up. So, like, what do you do now? So you know their URL. And one of the wonderful things about hunter.io is this section right here where it shows you what the most common pattern is. And we've all been doing this long enough that we know at the end of the day what the common patterns are. It's either first name at email address or first name dot last name, or, all right, come on, I got to do all this. All right, bear with me 1 second. I didn't realize I had to log into this one too. First name dot last name or first initial, last name, all of that sort of stuff. So that's where Mail Tester comes in. So you can actually type somebody's email address in here and it'll ping their server and tell you if it's a safe email address to use or not. So let's use David at AquaparGames.com. So again, we're assuming Hunter didn't tell us what the email address was, but we've guessed it. And that's basically what Mail Tester is. You're going to go in and try to guess people's email addresses. And so you're going to get like one of 3 different answers. It's either going to be like, this email is valid, so we know that we can go and we can send an email to this and it will at least show up in his inbox. You'll get ones that say it's possible, but it's basically it's an email trap, or it's completely open to anything. And so those are ones you might have to try a couple of different options for, or then it's going to say, no, it's not valid. And that means you got the right, server for the email, but you don't have the right person's address or whatever. But between, hunter.io and Mail Tester, you're going to be able to find most of the people that you need. In the event that you can't, that's where it pays to have that, existing LinkedIn account that makes you look like a grown-up professional developer. And you can just message people directly through there. You can message somebody on LinkedIn and say, hey, look, listen, we've got this game that we want to publish. We think you'd be a good option for it. Who should we talk to? Where should we send it? You can do that with LinkedIn. You can do it with Twitter. One that people don't necessarily always think about is Discord. Now, any publisher out there who has a good relationship set up with their consumers is going to have a Discord server. So I'm going to pull up ours real quick. Shameless plug. You can go to discord.gg/indiegamebusiness, and that's the Discord that we have set up for that whole education initiative. And there's like 1,900 industry professionals on there. But anyway, other stuff. Aquapara. So we can actually look up Aquapara's Discord server. And if you go over here on the right, somebody in the admin or the staff is typically going to be able to point you in the right direction. Now, if you look, it's purple, so you may not be able to read it. But right here, this is David. We can message him right now and say, hey, look, I got a game. So there's no one way that's always going to be 100% working for you to find the right partner. I mean, find the right person. But through these different systems, you can. And so even if you can't find the person right there on the admin, send a message to one of the people on the staff and say, hey, look, we've got a game. We're looking to have Akupara publish it. Who should we send it to? 9 times out of 10, they're going to point you in the right direction and get you set up and let you know where to send it. So with that, hopefully on this big spreadsheet that you're building now, we've got, the company name, their genres that they work in, the platforms that they work in, the budget ranges that they work in. We've got the names of the people that you want to send it to, their title, and their email address. And those are the main things that we want to have in there. When you're looking at things like genre and platform, typically that's going to be in like that tag section that we talked about, where it lets you go in and, sort a little better. We have, of all the 700 some publishers that we've got in our database, we've got them tagged out. So when a client comes to us and says, hey, I need help finding a publisher for our, shooter or indie game coming up, then we can easily go through and say, okay, we want to find all of the publishers in our system that do strategy games and RPG games. And then we put in those 2 tags and it pops it up, sends it to us. We're good to go. Okay. All right. So sorry, Ricardo, I saw your question and then I was like, oh wait, we already answered it. So no worries. Like I said, if you got questions, pop them in the YouTube chat. I'm happy to answer them along the way. All right. So you know who it needs to go to. Now you've just got to figure out what to send them. And this is where pitch decks are important. So a pitch deck is going to be 10 to 15 slides. Don't make it 20, 30 slides for one game, because you're basically going to tune everybody out. They're not going to want to read it. They're going to lose interest and they're going to go on to do something else. Still drinking coffee. All right. So first slide is who you are. Give an image of the game, logo, icon, simple, splash intro slide. Very easy. Overview, the next slide. You want to show them the basics: outline, genre, platform, target, target audience, monetization model, and all that stuff that we've already figured out. And then 3 to 6 features as bullet points. And so that kind of ties into the next slide, which is your unique selling points. And it's very important to understand the difference between a feature and a unique selling point. So features are things that are common to the genre or to other games. Unique selling points are things that are going to make your game, I know it says unique. It's ridiculously impossible to make a game have something that's completely unique, these days. But you want something that is not completely widespread in the genre. So to use an example, like it says here, post-apocalyptic setting is a feature that's not unique. There's tons of post-apocalyptic games. If we look at something like Fortnite, Fortnite's a good example, because when Fortnite came out, initially Battle Royale was a unique selling point. There weren't that many games where you dropped 100 people in on an island and they had to get gear and fight while the storm or the zone or the whatever was closing in. Now Battle Royale games are a genre in and of themselves. That's not a unique selling point anymore. That's a feature. But when you're going through and you're looking at these things, so your features on something like Fortnite is it's a battle royale game. Takes place modern weapons. You've got 14 different ammo types. You list out your weapons and your ammos and your armors, and all of that is just, those are features. What makes Fortnite different and unique among battle royale games? You can build and destroy buildings along the way. To date, there's still not a good one, that does it to that level that Fortnite does it. So that is your unique selling point. Yes, you can play Warzone and you can blow a hole in the building and there's, different entry points and things like that. But when it comes to actually building a complete building and blowing it all up, that's still Fortnite's unique selling point. You could even tag in their integration with different licenses, like they're doing now with the Marvel stuff, and like they've done with Star Wars, and all these different things along the way. Those are unique selling points. But Bottom line, make sure that what you're putting in there as a unique selling point is actually fairly unique, at least among the genre, if not among all games, all told. So slide 4 is going to be your story or background overview. You want to engage the publisher. You don't want to give them a story Bible or 6 slides about the war between the dwarves and the elves that took place 200 years ago in the lore of your game. Nobody cares at this stage. Nobody cares. You want to have very basic. And if you want an example, go to the Steam pages for like Fallout 4 and Skyrim. I mean, you've got gigantically deep lore and story that goes on in all these games, but they still can, for the overview, they tone it down to just a couple of paragraphs. And that's what you want to do. If somebody's interested enough, then you can have more information ready to send them on the lore. But, for the sake of a pitch deck, you just want to stick to the high level stuff. So, the next one's going to be a trailer or a gameplay video. Again, no more than 5 minutes on a video like this. I've seen developers and they pitch me with a 20-minute video on their game. It's just too long. People don't have that amount of time. You have to keep in mind, with today's environment where everything has suddenly gone digital, publishers are seeing 100 games a week. So they're not going to have time to spend half an hour watching a video on something. Give them a 5-minute video, but you're going to have approximately 30 seconds in the first part of that video to catch their attention. So don't put your splash screens and the slow fade-ins with your game name and all that stuff. That goes at the end. At the beginning, you want to immediately catch their attention. Action, show the different environments, show the different features of your game, put it in there really quick, because if they're not hooked and want to watch the rest of it by like the 30-second mark, then you've lost them anyway. So it needs to be really concise. Show the different variation in the game. Don't sit there and show a whole level being played. All they want to see is like the high points, the exciting things. Show the evolution of, your armor or your character build or all that sort of stuff, throughout the game, but do it quick. And then let's see. Next is concept art and screenshots. And this is the area where I see developers put the most, slides in a deck when they don't really need to. At most, have 1 slide for concept art and 1 slide for screenshots. You don't need 8 different slides showing all your concept art. You should be able to put 3 or 4 pieces of concept art on a slide that show you want variation. You want, different looks and show the different feel of the game. And, the same with screenshots. Don't put 3 or 4 screenshots in there that all fundamentally look the same. I mean, look at Star Wars as an example. The original trilogy. In your mind, if you think about the color palettes that go along with those first movies, A New Hope is basically sand and then black and white in a Death Star. Empire Strikes Back is very green, lush, jungle-y, and Return of the Jedi is, it's a little bit of all of them, but it's still mainly going to be that whole black and white inside the Death Star, that sort of stuff. That's what you want to be able to show. Well, hold on. I got that backwards in the midst of that. So yeah, the main one you think of in Empire is Hoth, where it starts. It's very white and snowy. And the other one for Return of the Jedi will be more jungly, aside from Dagobah. Anyway, regardless, you see what I'm saying? There's different colors that go along with it, and that's what you want to show. You don't want to show the same different screenshot or the same looking screenshot in 4 different places, because there's not going to be enough variation in it. But when you are doing your screenshots, make sure that your screenshots include the user interface, because that's a huge aspect of the game. Publisher wants to make sure that your UI and your UX is very clean and easy to navigate. So make sure you leave that in there. Then your company, schedule and budget. Sorry, skipped one. So you're going to have a lot of people out there that say, don't include the budget in your deck. I disagree 100%. You want to cut through enough of the noise and the game playing, not like your visual game, but like your negotiation game. Just cut through all that immediately. Look, you need $500,000 to make the game. Tell them you need $500,000 to make the game. Because what you don't want to do is waste anyone's time, yours included, pitching a $500,000 game to a publisher who only funds, $100,000 projects. If you have it in there and you say, we need $500,000, then they'll look at it and go, hey, look, we don't fund that much. They'll let you know that's it. You've saved time on both sides. So don't play stupid little negotiation games. Tell them how much you need. Now you have to figure it out first and make sure that whatever you need is accurate. But go ahead and put it in there and say, look, we need $500,000. Here's the time frame that we need it. We have 9 milestones coming up, and here are the milestone deliverables. Boom, right there, one easy sheet. We're going to deliver this. We need to get paid this. And there you go. That's how it's going to be laid out in the contract anyways. Just cut through the mess. The next one is the company profile. And so if you're a new studio, this is the part where it gets a little nerve-wracking, because you don't necessarily have a complete work history. You're new. You've never made a game as a company before. You just say that. Just say, hey, look, we're so-and-so studios, and our team members have built games before, but this is our first game as a team. And that's where you go into that next slide with the experience of your team leads. That's what people want. That's what the publisher wants to know. You don't need a bio on every single person on the team. You need an outline of your lead designer, your lead engineer, your lead artist, anything along the lines of sound design, things like that. All of your leads, your lead producer, those need to be listed there. So if it's your first game as a company, but the individuals on your team have experience there, you can put that in. Now, what if it's your first game completely and nobody has any company experience and nobody has any individual experience either? That's where, again, you just have to be honest and say, hey, look, this is our first game, but, use your experience here at the Game Jam as an example. We did a game for Game Jam Plus. Here's a link to it. There's nothing wrong with being new to the industry. We were all new to the industry at some point in time. Yes, some publishers aren't going to want to publish it because they're going to view you as too much of a risk. But then there's publishers who will, because they like your game and they understand the struggles that young teams go through, and they're going to be a good fit for you. So don't try to sugarcoat anything or make your team, appear to be bigger and better than they actually may be. It's like the budget. Just keep it honest. Tell them this is the game we want to do and why we want to do it, and this is why we feel we're the people to do it. But don't go in and inflate what you do, because I assure you, as big as this industry is, people like me, people like a lot of these publishers who have been around and doing this for 20 or 30 years, we can find out the truth in about 2 phone calls. So you never want to, overinflate what you're doing, and you always want to be honest, and you don't want to burn any bridges in this industry. It's very, very important. So, what's next? All right. So social media footprint. This is one that, has mainly become important in the last 3 or 4 years. So you want to show the number of followers on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, YouTube. How big is your Discord server? How many wish lists on Steam do you have? All of this data is very important. We used to send out projects 5-10 years ago, and if the developer had already had an early access page, the publishers were like, no, we don't want to touch it. They've already done early access, so they've already launched it, and we're not going to be, we can't control the narrative anymore. We don't want to work with them. Now, when we send out projects, one of the first questions we get back is, so how many wish lists do they have already? So you want to show that you've already thought some of this stuff through, that you've been growing your community, and it gives you a legitimacy to that publisher. It's like, oh, okay, well, they've already got like 500 or 1,000, wish lists on Steam. So there's obviously some people who are interested in doing this. Along with that, what you have to keep in mind is you have to be building this community from day one. So the minute you have your very first screenshot to show, you need to have that on an Instagram page, on Twitter, on Facebook, on all of these different platforms, pointing back at a Discord server where you can start growing that community. Because when you start building a game, one of 2 things is going to happen. You're either going to find a publisher who's going to want to know how much interest there is in the game, this is what you've got gathered over here, or you're going to end up self-publishing it, which isn't the end of the world. Tons of companies do it. But if you're self-publishing, you're absolutely going to have that, community built, because that's where your sales are going to come from. So you should always start very early, tweeting, showing gameplay videos, showing GIFs, all that sort of stuff to get that interest. But you need to catalog and cultivate that interest too, and keep them engaged, because that's going to help you, get this stuff done. So the last page is your contact information, obviously, and it sounds crazy. It's like, well, I sent this to them. They should know who it came from. What you have to realize is, like, in the various green light meetings that publishers have, your deck is going to get passed around to a whole lot of people who have never emailed you. So you need to have your website, the social media information, the email address and phone number for the person who's your business lead. All of that stuff needs to be on that last page of the deck. And yeah, that's it. 10 to 15 slides is ideal. Unless you're pitching multiple games, never send a deck with 20 plus slides, because that's what you're just going to lose somebody's interest, and you're never going to hear back from them. And so, following up, and this is where we said, it's important to have that CRM that lets you, set these reminders, because I don't care how organized you are. When you start like sending projects to 200 publishers, you're going to forget somebody. And so when you send the project to the publisher and you have that ability to, check in and say, okay, I want to follow up with them in a week, that's what you need to do. Now, with the sheer amount of games that are being pitched right now and the sheer amount of digital events that are going on, there's lag time. We used to say, send it, follow up in a week. If you don't hear anything, follow up in another week. And if you don't hear anything, follow up in the third week. Now, you want to give it a week, follow up the first time to make sure that they've seen it, and if you've got that email tracking in your CRM, you'll know if they've seen it, because it'll tell you this email address has been opened. But follow up 1 week after. But then if you don't hear back from them, or they tell you, it's like, look, we just haven't gotten to it yet, wait 2 weeks. So our standard, wait time used to be a week between follow-ups, but now it's a week to 2 weeks. Just depends on the publisher and how much that they got on their desk. But, if you haven't heard back from them the second or third time, then don't continue to harass them. Chances are your email address isn't going to the right person, or it's not being seen. And again, if you can look in your CRM and like no one has opened any of your emails, obviously it's not being seen. So if that's the case, yeah, you need to go back and find another contact and try to, get it to the right person. But overall, just remember, publishers are busy. Everybody's busy. Be polite, have patience, and answer any questions that they have, because that's the whole key of getting as much of this information that's pertinent into that pitch deck as possible, is so they don't have to come back and ask. They can say, okay, look, this is all the things that we look for in a game, and here's a link to the game that we can play. So do that. Just keep in mind, everybody's human. Everybody takes time to do these things, and be nice along the way. And so with that, that's what you need to know. If there's other things that we can help you with, obviously our consulting site is powellgroupconsulting.com, but we have the entire indie game business initiative that we do, that, where we sit down and teach developers how to do the business side of games. And so the Discord is discord.gg/indie game business. You can go to, anchor.fm/indie game business, and we have our weekly podcast that's up there where we talk to different developers and publishers and a lot of different folks around the industry, and get their takes and tips and guides on how to do business in games. And then there's the publisher list that I mentioned earlier. That's the thing that gets all this stuff started. So just go to powellgroupconsulting.com/publisher-list, and you'll be good to go. And so, yeah, if you've got any questions, all the indie game business stuff is at indiegame.business. And if you've listened to this and you're like, oh my God, that's like way too much stuff for me to have to deal with, I'd rather just hire somebody to do it, there you go. Our developer support program is powellgroupconsulting.com/developer-support. And so, questions. So what does that Powell Group do? So keep in mind, there's two different sides to what we do. The Powell Group is the consulting firm that I've run. We've been doing it for 10 years. I've been in the industry for 23 years at this point in time. So we literally help developers find publishers as part of what we do. We track 4,000 some developers and another 750 publishers. And so we have publishers that come to us and want to find, developers to do projects. We have developers that come to us for help getting contract work or help getting their game published. All of that stuff is, it's a consulting firm. That's what we get paid to do. Now, the realization that we have is a lot of people can't afford to pay us to do it. It's, budgets are tight and money is scarce. And so that's why we do the indie game business stuff. All of that is, completely free. We've got the website out there. We've got tons of videos and podcasts on how to do stuff, business stuff in the industry. We do digital events 2 or 3 times a year, which are, 100% free if you want to just watch the sessions. And we had at the last one, folks from the Epic Mega Grant team, had Kickstarter folks, people from Google, a lot of the major publishing things, they give talks, and our talks are always free. And if you want to do meetings with publishers, you can do that too. And it's really cheap. It starts at like $50. And so you're not paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to have access to these companies. But yeah, that's the 2 different main things that we do. On the free side, the education side is the indie game business side. And then the consulting, the paid work is on Powell Group Consulting. Did you ever work with a Brazilian company? Yes, Ian, we have. I cannot, off the top of my head, remember who it was, though. So we've worked with several studios in Latin America. I was actually down in Peru a couple of years ago for a lecture. We had one of the things that we do with a lot of the trade organizations, and we had the Argentinian teams as part of our last virtual conference in August, and they basically gave a hour-long presentation of all the work from all the studios that were in Argentina. It was awesome. And turns out that the Nickelodeon rep for Latin America was actually watching, and he messaged me in the middle of it. He goes, "Can I get in touch with them?" We're like, "Yes." And so we put them in touch with them. So yeah, we've worked with studios all around the world. And so that's why I said, we're sensitive to the fact that, money's tight and currencies aren't always the same. And so we always want to make sure that we can help in one way or another, whether you're actually hiring us or you're just listening and learning. And I think that's it for the questions. And wow, we did it exactly at 59 minutes ago. We're good to go now. Okay, wait, here's another one. So Ricardo says, do you think a Brazilian company should find Brazilian publishers? Not all the time. I mean, it's a global market. If you're going for something and your game is going to be shipped at retail, then yes, you're going to need a company who has experience in distribution and publishing in Brazil to really take advantage of it. But when you're talking about digital, no. I mean, when you're going through and you're doing that triage list of, building that target list of publishers, anyone who has done Brazilian Portuguese translations is obviously going to be a little more attuned to that market than someone who hasn't. So it's one of the categories that you can put in there. But today's market is so global that I would not, restrict yourself just to Brazilian publishers, unless you're, like I said, unless you're going to retail. And then obviously there's going to be some expertise needed there. But, one of the biggest problems that we see developers having, and, the biggest area of concern is that they don't show their game to enough publishers. We'll talk to a developer and they're like, well, we've already shopped it to everybody. It's like, well, how many companies did you send it to? They're like, oh, about 20 or 25. And I'm like, okay, so you only missed about 200. Aside from that, you're doing great. You need to get your game in front of as many qualified publishers as possible. So I would not, with the exception of doing, physical retail goods, restrict yourself just to Brazilian publishers as a Brazilian developer. Okay, all right. So that's a good point. So Ricardo says, I'm asking because the game can have a focus on Brazil, so a Brazilian publisher might have better insight. That is a excellent feature. An excellent point to have in there, because one of the things that helps you stand out as a unique selling point is if you're incorporating local culture and traditions and stories and mythology and all this other stuff into your game. That can be a very, very powerful, unique selling point. But in terms of making your game accessible, you're in a situation like that, you're actually better off with someone who doesn't necessarily work in Brazil alone, simply because they're going to be able to get your story out to so many more people. And having that unique selling point of a Brazilian-based game is actually something you want to get out to as many people as possible. Now, if we want to get really detailed, the Brazilian digital market, and you can look at just Latin America in general as well, We used to do deals 20, 30 years ago where every single country had its own publisher. Um, so because it had to go to retail, and they couldn't necessarily find one publisher who had excellent retail sources on, in South America versus North America versus Europe versus Australia. It's getting back to that same, sort of structure in a way. So one of the things that I would look to do is, yes, find a publisher that has a really good market knowledge of Latin and South America and pull that out of the contract. It's like, look, you're the publisher for this area. And then you're free to find another publisher for North America or Europe or Asia. The Latin American market isn't so gigantic that you're going to have a ton of publishers who say, okay, if we don't get to include it, it's going to break the deal. You have that option of splitting it up and using it that way. So that's one of the things I would look at. Okay. All right. So Ricardo, are there any more questions coming in? Let me know. I'm hearing beeps, but I don't know what the beeps are from. Okay, that's from something different. All right. So yeah, with that, if you all have any questions, my email address is right there. I mean, send me an email, j@powellgroupconsulting.com, or ping me directly on our Discord, and I'm happy to answer any questions as well. And so with that, that's all I've got. Thanks for listening, everybody. All right.
Oh, nice. Nice talk.
Eu conheci a Gazeus organizando uma Game Jam e pelo meu trabalho a Gazeus entendeu que eu seria aqui uma peça muito importante para construir essa empresa.
No ano passado, a Gazeus também me encontrou numa Game Jam. Eu estava trabalhando num projeto como Game Designer e hoje em dia eu faço parte do time da Gazeus como estagiário de Gente, Ensino e Cultura.
Participando de uma Game Jam e organizando Game Jams foi possível com que eu viesse para a Gazeus e começasse a administrar hoje o produto mais relevante dessa empresa.
Essa possibilidade de fazer novas conexões ou mesmo melhorar as suas conexões com pessoas do seu time. Às vezes você já tem um projeto em andamento, você já tem amigos com quem você trabalha, e esse é o momento ideal para você conseguir alinhar a expectativa de todo mundo quanto a um projeto que às vezes em 48 horas, por menor que seja o projeto, ele vai te dar muita informação.
Eu acho que o que mais dá pra gente tirar de legal, assim, que a gente aprende na Game Jam é a gente colocar a mão na massa mesmo, sabe? A gente testar coisas, sabe? Exercitar bastante o nosso lado criativo, assim, testar bastante coisas ali.
Seja com uma equipe que você conhece ou com uma equipe nova, você aprende a trabalhar em equipe nas diversas esferas que podem existir. Você aprende a lidar com pessoas diferentes e aprende a trabalhar com elas em conjunto. E a Game Jam te possibilita isso em um curto espaço de tempo.
Porque são nas Game Jams que você vai encontrar as pessoas mais apaixonadas por desenvolver jogos. As pessoas que querem realmente criar produtos novos e transformar o mundo dos jogos. Então, nada melhor do que procurar nesse ecossistema as pessoas que vão construir uma empresa muito maior.
E é por isso que nós da Gazeus acreditamos na Game Jam Plus.